Well, it is Mother's Day today, and my mother is here. So in front of all of you, let me formally apologize to my mother for that one time when I got lost as a toddler. Now, I'm sure she can correct all of my missed details in the coffee hour later, but the way I remember hearing the story, I was about 2 or 3 years old, and my parents were shopping together at some sort of a mall, and they decided to divide and conquer. My dad was going to go to some stores, and my mom was going to go to others. And each parent thought I had gone with the other parent. Have you ever misplaced something really important to you? Like your kid? Well, when they realized what happened, panic hit. And I've had times where I wasn't quite sure where my kids are enough to know that panic. I imagined their hearts were racing and it felt like they were going to throw up, and your mind is spinning so fast you can't make sense with any of your sentences. None of the words come out right. I'm not quite sure if they were more afraid that I was lost or that I had been snatched. And so they went through every store that they had been in, twice. And my mother found me in a dressing room that she had already looked in, only it was in a dressing room stall that was being used for storage and was marked off to the public. But, those rules didn't apply to me. I had crawled under that door and was sitting there very contentedly, having a wonderful conversation with my reflection. Not a care in the world. I apologize. I believe it was later that day that my mother bought me a leash. It was pink. I remember it. She was not about to take a chance of me getting snatched again. Spoiler alert, I'm still here, so it worked. And I learned from hearing that story, and when my daughters started to be able to walk, I bought them a puppy dog backpack that was a leash. It was cute, so they liked to wear it. But I figured if they were anything like their mother, I wasn't about to risk them getting lost or snatched. Well, mothers, I think, can be an awful lot like shepherds. They feed us. They guide us. They make sure we get enough rest. And they watch out so we don't get snatched. In our psalm today, we hear God referred to as our shepherd. And then in John's Gospel, we hear Jesus talking about us as sheep and himself as our shepherd. And I think to truly understand this reference, we need to go back a chapter in the Good News according to John. Chapter 9 has a story where we hear about Jesus having an encounter with a man who was born blind. And in the beginning of this encounter, everybody's asking, well, Jesus, why was this man born blind? Did he somehow sin in utero, or did his parents sin and he's being punished for it? Like, why did this happen? And Jesus tells them, no, that's not how God works. And then Jesus asked the man if he wanted to see. And he said yes. And then Jesus did something that some of us might consider pretty non-hygienic. He took dirt and he spit in it. Enough spit to turn that dirt into mud. Think about it. That's a lot of spit. And then he took this saliva-filled mud and smeared it on the man's eyes. It's a little gross. Some of us might be a little squeamish about that. I mean, really, isn't it only our mothers who can clean us with spit? You know? But then the man went and he washed his eyes. And I don't think he minded any of how Jesus did it, because it worked. He could see. This man who had been blind his entire life now had sight. But when the Pharisees heard what was going on, they missed the forest for the trees. And they narrowed in and decided that since Jesus had performed this sign on the Sabbath day, when it's against the law to do any work, you know, Gloria was talking about the commandments, that was an important commandment, it still is. That must mean that Jesus was a sinner and therefore not from God. And they asked this man who could now see what his thoughts were on the subject. And he replied, well, I don't know much, but I do know that God doesn't usually tend to work through sinners, and I couldn't see, and now I can. So, y'all Pharisees aren't making a whole lot of sense to me. I don't follow your logic. And to that, the Pharisees grew irate. They had been looking for an excuse to banish Jesus, and so they took that anger out on this man and banished him. They kicked him out of the community. And when Jesus heard what had happened, he stopped whatever he had been doing and went and found that man and told him that he belonged to him. And he was not about to let him get snatched away. And it's after that story that chapter 10 begins. And Jesus begins talking in different ways about how he is our shepherd and we are his sheep. You see, Jesus is explaining what just happened. In John's Gospel, we look at these signs to understand Jesus. And we look at Jesus to understand God. What Jesus did for this man is what God does for and with and through us. As often as we might not like to admit it, we all have times where we are blind, where we can't see injustices all around us, especially when they don't affect us directly. We all have been known to change the channel when, like the Pharisees, the story doesn't follow our narrative. We all can shut out and tune out those who are oppressed or marginalized because we don't want to hear their truths. They make us uncomfortable. They might change us. And so we have a darkness there. And we've also can have times in our life where we are blind to God's love, to God's grace, to God's joy, to God's peace. When we are in places where we are wrapped up in our darkness of our pain or hurt or loneliness. And it can almost feel like that darkness is trying to snatch us away. But then the shepherd calls us by name. And we know Jesus when he calls us. We know his voice. Because his voice is one of unconditional love and unrelenting grace. And occasionally, it might sound an awful lot like our mother's voice, calling us out of our hiding spaces, standing there with a leash in hand. When the world abandons us, or banishes us, or turns its back on us because of who we are, when we find ourselves in that dark place of grief, of depression, of anxiety, of being uncertain of the future and how we're going to pay bills or heal broken relationships, our shepherd comes and finds us and will not let us be snatched away. The good news is that who we are as sheep does not depend on how worthy we are. It doesn't even depend on us always believing the exact right doctrine every day. It doesn't depend on how much we've accomplished or if we always make the best choices. Our status as sheep relies solely on the shepherd who has come and found us, who has claimed us and named us as his own in the waters of the baptism, who feeds us at his table. And though our journey may have some dark valleys, and it may be messy at times, and some days we might have mud in our eyes, and I imagine Jesus might be tempted to come and put a leash on us. He is there. We trust that his rod and his staff, they comfort us. They may be used at times to strongly encourage us to get back on the right path. But we know that we are safe and secure with a good shepherd who promises us eternal life. And when we know this, when we know that we have been found, then we share this good news the way others who were blind and now can see do. And we let all the other sheep out there, especially the ones who have been banished, know that they, too, are beloved and belong. Amen. I invite you to stand as you are able for the hymn of the day.